What's up, Battletech fans? Here we are, back with yet another edition of Battle Talk, but this time we've got something special up our sleeve. We're discussing whether or not there are any bad mechs, and who better to have on this panel than our own Bishop Steiner down there in my bottom left. Say hello.
Yo.
We got Chris Lewis, the Pretzelbear from the Inner Sphere Paint Bay, to my left. Say hello.
What up? Hello.
And of course, we've got Worldwide Goji Kai.
Hey, welcome. And thank you for having me.
I appreciate you being here. So we are kind of piggybacking off of the Sarna.net article, Bad Mechs. So I'm going to put that question out there. I'm not going to take up too much of anybody's time. Are there bad mechs?
Yes, but it also becomes a much more pronounced matter when we start bringing in custom mechs. But the example used of the Charger was, by any reasonable standard, you're not using 8 million C-bills on a scout mech that has the speed of a medium mech, the armor of a medium mech, the firepower of a 20-ton mech. And literally the only way to make it good is I'm going to charge, which, by the way, damages your own mech, and so by about the third time you've done it, you've broken your 8 million C-bill mech. So, objectively, can it be used? And in a one-shot match, can it be useful? Yes. But as a design, and if you think of it from the campaign setting, it is a bad mech. Nobody would want to have to pilot that mech as their regular mech for their career in a campaign versus being able to cheat battle value in a one-shot.
I would posit that it's an inefficient mech.
No,
More
bad.
than a bad mech.
Inefficient is a Shadowhawk. Inefficient is a rifleman because it can't really make full use of its stuff. There's really not a position where the Charger shines. It limps by charging and kicking. But nobody spends 8 million C-bills to do melee combat.
No.
Unless you're on Solaris.
No.
Well, Solaris is what I was just about to bring up, because I thought to myself, okay, think you're in the era. You know, it's 30-25 level garbage that everybody is sweeping up off of the floor, their parts to put together their next machine. And you've got this thing, and it's going to be in close quarters. So you know those small lasers are going to get used, and maybe charging isn't the greatest idea, but punching and kicking are pretty good, especially when you're doing, 8-point punches there. One to the head here, a small laser does the trick.
Yeah,
I mean,
take some armor off and then use the small lasers for crit seeking.
I mean,
in a 30-25 match in a city.
Okay, so we're saying if we paintbrush everything to the most perfect niche condition ever, this campaign machine will have to be useful in that one thing, but then when your company has to drop in any other environment, it's useless.
Like I said,
I will absolutely give to you that you do not want to have this stinking thing out in the open in a regular combat planetary conquest type scenario.
We can take any mech and find a niche use for any mech to make it have a use. It's still not. Would you rather have, question right now, you're in the city combat. You have a choice of a CGR 1A1 Charger or a BTR 9B Victor. Please tell me, which one are you taking, boys and girls? For the same price.
Because I want the AC-20 in that particular.
Don't get
Give me the Victor.
But
I mean, you are automatically, instantly outclassed. Even a Zeus is going to be a better fighting machine in that situation for the same price. It can be fit in a niche where if you can corner smaller mechs with it, yes, it can bully boy them if they can't run away. But that's the problem. That's not making it even inefficient. Inefficient is something that can do the stuff, but is not great. It's genuinely bad unless you basically put it in a cage match. And how often outside of Solaris can you guarantee that?
No, outside of Solaris, you're right. I don't want that. I'd rather have the Victor in that particular case. But even in that particular scenario, I feel like that. Would you rather? You're on the Autobahn. Would you rather drive a Honda Civic, or would you rather get in this SRT Hellcat, and really hit it?
But the thing is, the Honda Civic is like what, $15,000. The Hellcat's $45,000. Here we're talking same expenditure for your Merc unit.
Yeah.
So that doesn't even really work. That's my point. Is you have to, for the same, anytime you can take the same, close to the same battle value, it's close to the same C-bill costs and stuff, it does win on the battle value front compared to a victory. I will give it that. But, which is why I say if you're doing one shot, like if you're FLGS and nothing counts after that match, you know, that's the same crap, though, that makes suicide driving a bunch of Savannah Masters a viable tactic. Which is why I will say, I'm sorry, Chris, I love you, man, but it's a bad mech.
I just don't believe the label bad mech fits anything, just because everything will have one niche, and most people are playing pickup matches.
Question: is a Yugo a bad car?
Is it what you can afford and drivable?
Is it a bad car, though? Is it completely unreliable, crappy gas mileage, and a death trap if you get hit in it?
If it's
Yeah,
what
I
you
mean,
can afford,
1973 Pinto.
Well, if
All
it's what
it
you can
is
afford
better
isn't
than
the
nothing.
question.
Yeah.
Because you're better off. No, that's not the question. What you can afford does not determine if something is good or bad. Chris, what you're basically saying is, by your context, literally there's nothing in the universe that exists that can be called bad, because you can always somehow find some use for the worst potato in the most niche case. Yes, some child in the middle of the Serengeti being given a 20-year-old laptop and a potato BlackBerry will find a use for those. We don't call them good today, though, do we? But let me use an example of a mech that I think is justifiably called, or unjustifiably called, a bad mech, but is a misunderstood, misapplied mech. Let's look at the JagerMech.
Oh, the Jaeger bomb.
If one looks at it as a cage match, two mechs dueling in a bubble like at Solaris, it's going to get his butt kicked almost every time.
Sure, it doesn't have the armor.
But at what point does one take a Whirlwind anti-aircraft armored vehicle and decide to want to go toe-to-toe with an Abrams or a Merkava by choice? You don't really sit there and expect an anti-aircraft vehicle to be a frontline toe-to-toe soft knocker.
But in campaigns, you're always going to have that one pilot who's like, no one will expect this.
But that's not the point. Not the point. Hold on, Goji. Take that same JagerMech, stick it on 18 hexes back of your front line, throw out a screen with a couple hunchbacks, a thunderbolt for the rest of your lamps, and nobody's going to really, one, pay attention to the little planking from the JagerMech initially. Two, their to-hit modifiers are going to be so bad compared to the stuff in their face that has AC-20s and crap there, that suddenly JagerMech's being useful, and then people will all send a light mech to flank. Go ahead, send your Jenner, because the JagerMech does have enough armor and enough firepower to shred the crap out of that Jenner before it gets in range of those medium lasers and gets forward. You know, and there's a good chance that one of the mechs screening will also be able to at least do a partial turn and add some firepower into that. Is there a chance that you could screen with enough light mechs possibly? Yes, there's nothing that's cannot be occasionally defeated. That's what tactics are called. There's always going to be ways to overcome everything. It's rock, paper, scissors. But used correctly, most of the time, a JagerMech will be an effective part of the unit, despite its reputation as a bad mech, which is based on the fact it does have crap armor, like almost every anti-aircraft vehicle in militaries today.
Well,
paper thing.
I mean, and that just comes down to the fact that with every battle mech, you're balancing 4 factors. You've got your armor, you've got your damage output,
structure,
you've got your heat balance,
and mobility,
and your mobility.
And
you can't have all 4,
especially in 3025.
Exactly.
That's where you get later to eras, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. Succession wars, not so much. But that's where I take your same things back to you, though, your argument there, which is correct. But I'll say the time you sometimes get into bad mechs is when your overbalance doesn't really gain you the benefit. For instance, by putting a 400 XL engine into a Charger, you're still barely faster than a mech with a 320 at the same weight. So you're not really gaining. It's not like your Charger is a 914 mech for all that overemphasis. You'd be so much better off putting that same type of cost and stuff into a medium mech to begin with. And the only thing you'd be weaker at would be melee, because you could carry the same armor, you'd have better firepower, because even the 55-tonners outgun the Charger. And no, they move the same speed and have essentially the same armor.
And that was the definition of efficiency that I was talking about.
And that's why I'm saying, though, you can skew that level of efficiency so far to one end that it's no longer good at all. You can get bad with anything eventually, and sometimes it's also just a bad concept. A assault scout is not a good idea to begin with. It doesn't really fill a real niche in military tech.
Keep in mind, guys, that I've very little experience with tabletop, as Tuck knows well. I'm recently have been getting into finally getting into HBS Battletech and the extended 3025 Commander's Edition and the
arenas they give you in HBS honestly aren't going to be a good gauge for stuff like how to properly use the scout red, because of how they also do the E-War setup and how Guardian ECM gives you the invisibility bubbles and you have the range bubbles, but that doesn't accurately reflect tabletop or the novel.
I'm picking up on that.
And I mean, there's also things that a person could say, as much as I defend the assassin on tabletop, if I'm looking at it from a campaign standpoint, the drawback is any mech that pretty much cripples your pilot after a few years of piloting, I'd have to eventually put on the bad mech pile, because you're crippling your pilots with ruining your backs with that tiny cockpit, which probably also is exacerbated every time you jump and land. You probably ram your kidneys into your brain stem. So I mean,
these are things I don't think the average person thinks about.
But I'm saying, you can find reasons, whether in tabletop rules like the Charger or lore for the Charger and the Assassin, where there are reasons one could legit label them as bad, because there is an inherent issue that cannot be overcome with that tech level at that time. That's where I've argued with people on the tabletop side. And I've described how I've used the Assassin. You recently had the Assassin save your bacon, if I recall correctly, in a tabletop instance. Is used correctly, good luck hitting me, and I'm only peppering you with an LRM 5. So the other way you're going to piss people off is you're not doing an 8-round match. Now, 25 rounds later, I'm still tossing LRM 5s at you, and you haven't probably hit me yet. It is a harassment tool used correctly. Charger eventually can become a good mech. And people can say, well, you also have the ones with the 4.6 engine. At which point I'm like, is it really a Charger, though? Now you're basically making another Zeus or Victor.
Well, and I think some of that comes also from, we've had so many video game versions out where it's easy to customize everything about your mech.
And
even though after Mech Warrior 3, nothing truly follows tabletop rules.
No.
I mean, even HBS doesn't, but I still enjoy trying to make bad mechs viable.
Let's make one caveat for that. I have to argue with your point on one point there, Chris. Not because I want to argue with you, but because I get so tired of everyone saying Mech Warrior 2 and 3 were tabletop accurate.
No,
you could not modify engines the way you could in Mech Warrior 2 and 3. So no.
Exactly.
Now the weapons were closer.
All I'm saying is with your loadouts, it was, and I'm not saying Mech Warrior 3 was the pinnacle or anything. It was a fun game.
It was fun.
I enjoyed Mech Warrior 4 more.
But it was fun if you like taking one bushwhacker and having to kill like 13 dudes.
The problem it created that mentality in players that every mech is an open palette to do whatever you want.
Exactly.
Right.
Mechs became not mechs, but a skin for whatever you wanted to put on it. And
whereas
you see a trend of players who use the construction rules, not the customization rules, because again, they're playing one-offs. They're not playing campaigns. They're not doing things that do the rules, and so it gives a very skewed view of Battletech, the universe, versus Battletech, I'm doing a Magic the Gathering one-shot game at the local games style. But there's a reason why even the Premier, the Dragoons, the Irandani Light Horse, the Davion Guards, almost entirely are stock mechs. Even the princes of the realms were driving stock battle mechs. Okay,
Stavian famously did it.
Yeah, well, almost all. You do see more on Solaris, but that's like anything else. That's like going to a racing place. You know, you go to the drag races, people have a bunch of customs that probably would not be reliable daily drivers, just like these customs on Solaris, most of the time probably would not be reliable on campaign.
Well, and for anyone who's tuning in and watching the discussion, go load up MegaMech. Go tell it, I want to see all the Inner Sphere mechs. The only ones in there that are customs are the ones with parentheses after them.
Yeah.
With a specific name. There's not that many overall compared to the number of mechs there are. Most people use stock mechs, and they just try to tailor their use of the mech to what they're doing.
Unfortunately, it's again another thing that the video games have skewed, like MechWarrior 4 insisting on hero mechs for everything, because you can't really sell a hero if it's the same thing as a stock mech. So they came up with the Black Widow.
Yeah.
But
right.
you know, and HBS, same thing. You see that with the Bounty Hunters insane mech, and they did translate some of that. Like, one of the things I didn't like in canon was all this talk on how the Bounty Hunter suddenly had all this lost tech on his Marauder in the 3015s and 3020s. I was like, when the crap did this happen? Because when the Tales of the Black Widow was published, it was a stock Marauder 3R.
Yeah.
Right.
You know? So there have been retcons which have also unfortunately fed toward that. Just like we see retcons where, despite in the novels, at the beginning of the Clan Invasion, almost nobody had advanced tech in their mechs. The princes were driving bone stock 3025 machines and all that. But now they've started, because the LBX was available in 3040 or 3035 in Free Worlds League, and MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries allowed you to start customizing at that point. It's got to the point now where suddenly there's this plethora of mechs with all these advanced weapons in the late 3030s and 3040s. But it makes no sense then that the Royals would not only be piloting, not have them, that the Davion Guards would not have had them. I mean, it flat out was said, the Revenants, Victor Steiner Davion's battalion, was the first battalion to be refit with new tech machines.
Yes.
In the Federated Commonwealth.
Well,
and that's where the retcons kill me on it, and I think it can again feed into the misconception on crap for play.
Another thing that I think improperly skews folks' opinions on what constitutes a bad mech is the inability to fire literally everything with zero consequences. And I'm not sure if that's based on video games or if that's based on, or if that's a byproduct of double heat sinks, Clan Invasion. There you go. You see where I was going with that.
It's both.
A little bit of both.
I want to bring up an example. I want to bring up an example of a mech that I'm really starting to take a shine to, but anybody I've ever brought it in front of goes, really? You want to use that? It's the RFL 4D Rifleman. And I'm talking about strictly 3025 here. So just two
the toaster.
Large lasers.
No, it's not the toaster, it's the sauna. Get it right.
Oh, sorry.
And
the Rotisa map then.
If you run and you dump both of these PPCs out, you're going to go to 7 heat. I don't feel like adjusting to that heat is that bad. I don't even feel like it's that big of a drawback. It has to cycle through fire, just like other heavy hitters of the Era, the Awesome, the Warhammer, the Marauder.
Most clan gear. Bristling with weapons, but if you fire them all, you're going to just shut down immediately.
Go ahead and Alpha Strike that Warhawk Prime or that Hellbringer Prime. I dare you.
I feel like those are
be like Michael Bay explosion.
That's more the case, but you look at the majority of the stock primes, most of them were still built around bracket fire. The Mad Dog cannot Alpha Strike with any regular. The Timberwolf can. The Summoner, one of the reasons that made it exceptional is it's one of the few that could all day, every day.
Right.
But speaking of heat, and this is kind of where I get tripped up with some folks, is I go, yeah, it generates a little bit of heat. So what? Learn to deal with it. Learn to play this machine at -1 movement. Learn how to work around with these problems so that when it happens to you, it won't be a problem. And then you can have more versatility with this thing than you would have had previously if you're going, ooh, but I gotta watch my heat.
Learn how to deal with it. People totally piss the bed at the thought of writing the heat scale for the most part, and I don't. I think that is, as much as I don't want to be a grog thing, because I actually see a lot of grogs who do it now too. But at least in my era, growing up playing tabletop, and even early Clan Invasion, we didn't get the good toys at the conventions. Sorry, kids. And we didn't get to play the clans either, just FYI. We got to fight the clans with our 3025 decks, and oh my god, did that hurt. But very much, if you wanted to win, you found times where you rode the heat scale. There's a reason all the novels basically focus on people sweating through everything because they're constantly riding that red line. And, you know, you have to be careful because you cross the red line, especially at ammo explosion levels, it could come back to bite you. But
it's that risk reward that makes it so exciting. That's what makes it worth doing, is that this might fail, but oh boy, if it doesn't, that's going to give me a real big advantage.
And let's look at you're bringing out the risk reward, but there's also, let's bring out the one other thing, that the big bad mech maker on everything. Ammo in the center torso is special.
The
thud.
The rifleman is very guilty of that. That's why I always feel like
Thunderbolt as well
is a lot better risk and reward.
But here's the question:
there than the 3N.
Here's the question: is ammo in the center torso a bad thing? It
is to me.
Armor.
It is to me.
No. You have the most armor there on every design. You have 10 crit pads automatically on every mech.
Okay.
See, that's HBS does not do that. You get hit in the CT and HBS, you pop. That's another area it's wrong. So you don't get engine and gyro crits. And people go, but Bishop, if I roll a 2 on location, it's a through armor critical. Yeah, it is. You still have at least 10 other crits padding it. Oh, and by the way, if you get shot from the right or left flank and roll a 2, that's a through armor critical on your right or left torso, which I guarantee have less crit padding. And most of these mechs you have ammo in it, like let's say, a Marauder 3R with its completely unpadded ammo in the left torso.
It didn't used to be that way. To the Marauder's benefit, it didn't used to be that way.
I get it. The old game from Battletech 2nd Edition on, the mech's there. And fine, let's look at the Zeus, unpadded ammo in the right torso. The Crusader, unpadded torso and ammo in each torso.
Yes.
The point is, those, unless you're doing Napoleonic, facing each other front to front, static, you are going to get many side flank shots in any active dynamic game.
Well, there's a reason.
Those are a much surer death than ammo in the CT is. Much.
Well, and the other, and I'm gonna say this nihilistically, the other point of ammo in the center torso is it guarantees if you do take an ammo explosion, your enemy is not going to get that mech for salvage.
That's one. And here's another thing from the lore standpoint. Just like World War II, they started towards the end, I believe in 1945, putting wet storage in the Shermans. You know what the tankers did? They ripped it out because the wet storage took up room for more ammo, and they wanted to have that extra 10 shots or so of ammo in their tank instead. Soldiers and techs in 3025 aren't sitting there going, oh my god, the sky is falling, I have ammo in my CT, let's move.
Right.
And so when people start making a big thing out of it, it just drives me nuts because it is not supported by the mechanics of the game. It's not supported by the lore of the game. It's just people being chicken littles. The sky is falling over a perception, because what people forget, what people always.
But what if is the
it's the what if? Story. But that what if is just the same reason people swear by quote unquote crit seeking builds. They look at that one time that
that's me.
Crit seeker.
I'm in this post and I don't like it.
And they overlooked 25 times.
Next time you come for me like that, send a town card.
I didn't build that fire started. It's not a piranha, I swear.
Your pinpoint damage heavy mechs are going to more efficiently and consistently kill other mechs than crit seeking will. But that little adrenaline boost people get from the crit seeking when they get it makes them think that it happens a lot more often than it does, and the reverse is true. People act like every game, ammo explosion. I can think of many matches that I never saw an ammo explosion in.
Sure.
Many matches I never saw headshots in. Then you get that one where you get 2 headshots, and that's all you think about. Oh my God, the Gauss rifle insta kills all the time. And it skews how people look at things, because we get that serotonin from the either really bad experience or the really good experience, and we don't
confirmation bias.
Yes, we don't look at it mathematically accurately as to what actually happens consistently on the average game.
Sure.
That
I wholeheartedly agree with. So let me bring up the one that I seem to get the most pushback on, and I think it was the very first Sarna Bad Mechs article, the Banshee. Everybody hates the Banshee.
Now that's
it's a very difficult mech to get it to work right.
But I will say that's one that Chris is right. That's the 3E is inefficient because it does have enough long-range firepower to be a threat. It's not a great threat. It's still low-end, heavy to medium firepower, but it also has medium or to heavy mobility and assault mech armor. So it's not good, but it's also, in my opinion, not outright bad because it has enough firepower to be doing significant damage with a PPC and AC5, enough heat sinks to use both as it closes into melee range. The drawback is once you get in melee range, your to-hit modifiers for using either of those torso guns are really high, but you got enough heat sinks that you don't have to worry about waste heat if you miss, too. So
I feel like if you're in melee range with a Banshee, you've already lost.
Yeah, pretty much.
You shouldn't let the Banshee get that close to you, otherwise, because then the shooting guns doesn't matter when you're like going blam, 10-point punch, 10-point punch, or 20-point kick.
Exactly, and if you can add in the torso guns and the head guns too, that's just icing on the cake.
And that's why I'm not a fan of the mech.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to call it bad. It's just not my style because I like my assault mechs to be a little more melee centric.
Obsolete and inefficient mech.
Yeah,
that is one I 100% go by Chris's definition.
See, I still just love the silly thing because I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're going to get a low battle value out of that thing. So you're going to be able to put a decent pilot in it. And then that 15 damage a turn doesn't set, you're right, it's not a lot off the cuff, but applied every single turn, just 15. It's like a ticking clock that just never stops. And if you've got a decent pilot in there and you're hitting 75% of the time, that shit adds up. And,
also, riddle me this. Because I'm agreeing with you. While I'm not going to say it's a better machine than, let's take the famed Atlas. At ranges outside 6 or so hex, what's its average damage if it hits? It's basically a single LRM-20.
LRM-20s, yeah. Average expected damage is 12.
12, broke into 3 areas. So until about 6 hex range, your Banshee's actually laying down more average firepower than your Atlas is. Not a lot more. Now, admittedly, when you get into the 6 hex range, AC-20 or 6 is going to cause some pain. But reality is also, unless you're doing these, again, small tabletop scenario like single map, especially with the bigger slower mechs, not everyone's running to the middle of the map in the first 3 turns.
Nope.
And if you are, you're probably getting shot to crap by the guy that knows how to use long range mechs instead. So there is going to be a lot more rounds at those longer ranges, which is the reason I like the RS more than the D, because at medium range, it's a lot more effective than the super grand firepower of the Atlas up close. And so, there are things that people completely overlook, again, because they always look at every mech in a Solaris bubble. If I'm doing a one-on-one duel,
and I'm running to the middle and
pew. And it's a very myopic and inaccurate look that unfortunately gets fostered by the nature of people are in a hurry, people use small maps, and so they do everything that encourages these tactics, which inflates this illusion of what works. It's why people are trying to tell you that the Grasshopper is the greatest heavy mech ever, despite the fact it's okay.
It's good, but it's not the best
not
thing.
Great, and how in an open
battle, it's solid.
An Archer 2S or 2R will probably chop its legs off before it ever gets into effective range, because for most of the battle, it's going to be in range to use an LRM-5 and a large laser. I hear people say all the time, Well, for mercenaries, it makes more sense to do energy weapons, man, because ammo's expensive, man.
And you still have to maintain those energy weapons.
Yes. I think there are people who play a lot, but they get so into their lane of how they do things. They never really take the opportunity to see the other stuff, because I see a lot of people who are supposedly very experienced players who are like, I hate the urban mech. And I'm like, great, go ahead, come to my city and I'll use urban mechs and absolutely kill your butt in the game. Because they just have that viewpoint. Again, it's not great for my frontline merc unit. And
my super special snowflake merc unit that has whatever I want with as much money as I could possibly spend.
Because the urban mech is niche. It's just like the Hatchman, just like the Victor. Good for defending city, good for defending industrial park. Crap for pretty much everything else. Niche mech.
Sure.
Use it in that niche, it's good. And I guess that's the other thing. Is it good in its niche, Chris? And that's why I say the Charger is not legitimately good even in its niche. It can kind of get by if it has to, but it's not even good in its niche, which is in a very narrow niche to begin with. That's
right.
Why I have to have my there are legit bad, because bad does exist in the world.
I'm starting to come around, I think, to Bishop's line of thinking, and let me explain what I mean. I'm feeling like if you have something and you have to modify the scenario in order to make that thing be okay, now it's going to shine. If it is under this particular set of circumstances, then I don't know if I would call it bad necessarily, but I'd say it's not great overall. There are much better things.
I will say there is niche and there is niche.
Yeah.
If your niche is you're walking down an alley at night, I can be useful. I'm going to say you're probably bad. If your niche is at least I can do XYZ like city fighting in a Victor. I don't consider a Victor a good frontline mech, but it has enough ability where it is good in industrial parks. It is good in CQB. It's not a bad bodyguard. It's good at Solaris. So you've got that, the difference in the niche. You have a niche and then you have ultra niche. If you're ultra niche, I'm not going to say it's a good mech ever.
All right, that's fair. That's totally fair. As much as I may want to be like, no, just it's good. I swear, just let me have it. Okay.
Then there's mechs that are like jack of all trades, master of none, kind of like the Shadowhawk and the Griffin. And those are the two I instantly think of.
I got nothing but love for those two, and everybody hates
I'm not saying they're bad. They're not
Shadowhawk
bad.
Is
situational. It's a niche mech.
I have to argue with you on the Griffin. Griffin is a pure long-range fire support mech.
Yeah,
nothing jack of all trades.
That's not what I use it for, but
come on, Rhonda. But you just nailed the point.
Yeah, you're not.
Some of those
very limited in use.
There's a reason the Griffin and the Wolverine are the same tonnage. One is your long-range fire support mech, and one is your
tanky tank,
and then one is the Shadowhawk is the guy in between that supports both as needed.
Exactly
right, and most people don't realize how to play that.
And then you put another, a bug with them, or a slightly heavier mech with them, or whatever, and you build a balanced lance.
Or you could even add another 55-tonner like the Dervish and have two dedicated fire supports. And either way it works. And that's the thing. People also do look in the bubble of how one mech operates, not how it operates as part of a unit. And there are mechs like the Trebuchet and the Centurion, which were meant to be deployed together.
Now, the Shadowhawk, I got nothing but love for. And I want to kind of go back over this for just a second.
Oh, the Shad is a beautiful mech.
A magic card that when it came out, I always remembered the flavor text and used it for Battletech purposes from then on, which is even the threat of power has power. And up until then, I had always said, it's not so much what you do necessarily, it's what you might do. It's what you could do. What could I do if I did this? And that's going to influence how your opponent moves and what they choose to shoot and at whom. Now, the Shadowhawk is unattractive to a lot of folks, I think, because of that video game mentality where you're looking at the record sheet, and even I think the TRO says it lacks any kind of weapon that just goes, ugh, right?
It's all paper cut weapons. That is true. And I think that's part of the problem is it's cursed with the AC5, which everyone hates in tabletop.
But what they leave out of that conversation is it's got the heat sinks to be able to shoot all of those guns, and all of those guns have a decent smattering of ranges that they can be used at. Right. So you have all that versatility. Yeah, sure, it may not hit you for 10 points of damage in the head, but if you put the damages of all these weapons together and you couple it with your buddy in the Griffin who did just land that PPC, the Shadowhawk is a threat now, because you could put your opponent over the top and force a piloting skill roll. And if you're using, classic pilots, 4 gunnery, 5 piloting, a 6 isn't necessarily a guaranteed pass. You might fail that.
The only thing I think also people look at it, and it again hits the AC5 thing. Everybody wants to put a PPC or large laser in the place of it. But
the Wolverine has an AC5 and nobody complains about it.
Except
everybody loves the Wolverine,
true.
I guess, because it jumps 5.
Oh, that armor on a Wolverine is deceptively difficult to chew through.
But no, almost every time when you see people love on the Wolverine, the caveat is it's almost always the 6M with the large laser.
Yeah.
And I am the stand for the 6R because people overlook the heat efficiency factor and that's the extra range. I am a huge proponent of the 6R. It's not quite as good up front, but you get 5, 6, 7 rounds in the battle, the 6M is starting to overheat quite a bit, or not using most of its firepower to not be overheating, especially if you're jumping.
Sure.
Wolverine 6R, you can max your mobility and pretty much alpha constantly.
Going.
And
Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, and so there's advantage. If I was building a Lance, I wouldn't mind having one of each because it's nice to have that alpha punch too. I'm not going to deny that. Yeah. But people, especially in 3025, most mechs can't alpha strike for more than 1 or 2 rounds before they're shutting down.
Right.
Unless they're a mech like the Shadowhawk or the Wolverine 6R, where they do have technically less firepower, but they are very heat efficient and you just keep going through it all nonstop. Same thing with the
consistency is super
It might not have the punch of the large lasers at closer range of the rifleman, but those 4 autocannons cost it 4 heat every round.
Yeah.
So it can literally fire until it's out of ammo, and if it's standing still and something closes, it can fire the medium lasers without any heat being added to its waist either, which is again why I say, go ahead, bring your javelin, bring your Jenner, try to hunt down my JagerMech in the backfield.
Yeah.
And there are so many things where people, and again, like you said, people look at it in that stupid Solaris bubble, and I blame the video games. I blame even kind of to a degree, the alpha strike mentality, not knocking the game itself, but people are in such a rush and want to have a half-hour tabletop match that they purposely basically handicap themselves in any units that don't fit into that short range rush at each other game. There is that impatience, I think, and everyone has that want. It's more fun to stand and slug it out at point blank, and I'm like, well, fun is subjective. I don't think I'm playing a war game. I'm not playing Rock'em Sock'em Robots. I'm not playing Magic the Gathering. I'm trying to play a tabletop war game.
Yep.
But 3025, that was the era of bad mechs, quote unquote, because it was also the era where you used whatever the heck was running. Again, even in that era, people overlook, okay, you have a pristine Charger or a pristine Banshee, and yes, this guy has a Warhammer, but it has had damage because it lost its arm 3 battles ago, and the pilot could never replace it. Because you read any scenario pack, at least 1/3 to half of every unit had mechs with permanent damage in that area.
Or so problems with their equipment.
Anything, it did give you a slight leg up in that era. Then, it's like, hey, a Warhammer's great. Warhammer with 1 arm is a little less great, though.
Yeah. I mean, then there's that adage that only a poor pilot blames his equipment.
Let's use NASCAR as an example. You can have the best driver, you can have a great pit crew, and you can be shipped a crap motor from your sponsor and factory, and you did everything right, and something like your crank snaps because there was a defect in the production.
Yep.
It's a bad motor. It's not a legit motor, Chris. Sorry. It's a legit bad motor, okay? And it happens. And sometimes that happens. There's been instances where cars have come into production that had suspension that got people killed, that have this and that. I mean, that's why we have recalls on cars all the time. And in War Machines, I mean, you look at the iterations it took to get something like the Osprey to not be a death trap for the Marines.
Oh God, I remember how long it took.
Especially considering that a lot of these are built for government contract use, and all that crap is typically put together by the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
When you're
Mil-spec
putting
is
it
not
together.
actually something desirable to the average soldier. You know, civilians hear the word mil-spec, they go, "Oh, it's military grade." Soldiers hear it and they go, "Oh God, it's military grade."
Yeah.
So you have inefficient, you have improperly used. These are all things so that people can put the perception of being bad. Whereas stuff that is legitimately bad, I will say, is in the extreme minority. You know, there are things which are inefficient, there are things which are niche. Truly bad is pretty small, and half the truly bad is stuff that's also truly bad by the lore, like, is it the Shalone or the other Frisbee Sholagar that had the reputation of killing its pilots on atmospheric entry so it would lose control? Now, in the game rules, that doesn't make a difference. But in the lore, you'd have to call that a bad aerospace fighter if it's killing your pilots every time they enter atmosphere.
SANTA clause. Burn up on re-entry.
And there's also not bad designs that have bad features. The Spider is not a terrible mech for what it uses. Its lack of an ejection seat is a very bad feature.
Where you got to climb out when your mech's about to blow up.
Anytime you have an aerospace that doesn't eject, that's a bad feature. Is it necessarily a bad aerospace fighter? Well, not until you get to the point where you have to eject. It can actually be a very effective fighter.
Yeah.
I mean,
as long as you ain't got to punch out.
You look at a lot of times people
get in there, man,
with logistics overcome bad or mediocre designs. The M4 was not the best tank in World War II, but it was reliable enough and in huge numbers, and logistics kept it going. You looked at the air war in World War II. Zero started as the best thing in the Pacific Theater, and in about 2 years it was the worst thing in the Pacific Theater still flying.
Yeah.
But they had used what they had in numbers, and as long as they had good pilots, it still was relatively effective in mass. And again, and these are things that all skew your view, but so many people get that myopic view and don't take the time to think about the context, the circumstances, the era, the reality of campaign play, the reality of the customization and repair rules. These things all matter. But most people, when they're judging a bad mech, don't look at any of those things. They just look at 1v1 in a vacuum.
All right, Battletech fans, I think that's going to be our opinion for the evening. We've had such a great time here with the crew joining us from around the inner sphere to talk about whether or not bad mechs are a thing. If you like what you've seen so far, do us a big favor, smash that subscribe button down there and turn on all notifications so you can find out exactly where Battlebound's going to turn up next. We'll have more content coming at you very soon. Thanks so much for joining us, and folks, we'll see you all next time on the Space.
Be sure to smash our like button and subscribe to our channel.
Crowdfunding is when lots of people give you small amounts of money to help your passion project come to life.